that there was subsequent communication between the two because of elsewhere in discovery, but there are no reports on it or details. It's reports on it and the details have been redacted. Hey guys, it's Vanessa with Unmasked. First, I just want to thank all of you who have watched this entire series and have been so supportive along the way. There are so many of you who spend countless hours researching and finding information and sending it to me. I just want those people to know that I couldn't do this without all of your hard work and excellent investigative skills, and I appreciate all that you do. So this part builds off of part 7, and it's about all of these people that started coming out of the woodwork all around the same time and their possible connections to each other and to other people in the case. And again, these are just things that we found on different public social media posts, and all of these people are mentioned in public discovery and are public figures. So in this video, we're going to take up where we left off in 7, which is the end of Trent's video with CBI agents in Wyoming. We'll go over the part about Damien in public discovery, and then Amanda, aka Tinder Girl. So at the end of part 7, Tammy Lee had asked Trent if he would be willing to give a polygraph. He got on his phone, texted a bit, said that he was talking to his mom, that she had talked to an attorney, and they suggested he not give one. In the interest of time, because part 7 was getting so long, I cut it off before the end of Trent's interview. But there were a few other important things and some key points that I want to hit before we move on. So after Trent has gone through this timeline of all of the times he's allegedly met up with Chris, Tammy tells Trent that they can verify all of these locations with Chris's GPS on his company vehicle. She also mentions that he cannot drive his work truck at night outside of company hours, which has been confirmed by the other Anadarko coworkers. So Tammy says to Trent, is there a reason we wouldn't see these locations on Chris's GPS? And Trent's response is less than confident.
So, Trent, there's GPS that we know as far as, his vehicle and stuff, so we can verify all of this. So is that going to show that he was at Centera and that he's at this Ronald Reagan Boulevard address and all of that?
I mean, yeah, it should.
Is there any reason it wouldn't?
Not that I can think of. I mean, unless, can you turn your GPS off?
They can't.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, no. Not that I can think of.
And we haven't seen much about him driving his work truck at night, because he can only drive it when he's working. So just some of this stuff I'm just trying to figure all of that out,
Pieces together, yeah.
Yeah. So what did he say about it? Did he ever make a mention like I shouldn't be driving this right now, or this is my personal truck, or anything like that?
No, he was very, it was like he was very careful, but he never, mentioned anything about it.
What do you mean he was careful?
Like, he was, almost like he was constantly looking around, but I assume that was because of the situation,
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, no, he had never mentioned anything like that.
So it seems like you guys, knew him for quite a while.
So right there's another slip up, and there's so many slip ups in these interviews with him, with others, with Amanda, with NK. We've seen it over and over again. So he says that Chris was paranoid and always looking around because of his situation. Well, what situation is that? If it was because he's with another man, that could be a friend. That doesn't mean anything. If he's referring to him being married, which is how I interpreted this, That doesn't make any sense because this whole thing has been about how deceptive Chris was and how he didn't know he was married until February of 2018. So I want to move on now to this whole Damien storyline. So for those of you who haven't really paid attention to this storyline, I have no idea if he and Damien had a relationship. He calls him his ex-fiance. That could be completely made up. I have no idea, and honestly, I don't even really think it matters. What I do think matters very much is why he even mentions his name in the first place and drags him into this. Do I think that there's a reason he does that? Yes, I do think that there is some connection. I do think that there are some important things to look at, and it led us down this whole rabbit hole. So Trent's story is basically this, and it's really interesting. He says that they've had this off and on again 6-year relationship that was extremely toxic. He says that in the fall of 2017, they had this big breakup blowout. Now, what's interesting is I do look for confirmation on things that are true as well as false, obviously, because we just want the whole story. I did find a video on Trent's wall where he is, and I believe it's from the 4th of July weekend that he mentions to CBI of 2017. And in this live, he's talking to some friends and he is staying in an apartment in Loveland, and he's trying to figure out the remote and the Roku. So it does look like he was staying in that person's apartment in Loveland, and he clearly wasn't familiar with it. And he talks about coming to downtown Denver to go out that night. And he does mention Damien to his friends and their ongoing saga or drama of their relationship. So I did question, would he bring that up to his friends if that was completely imaginary? Or does he bring it up to his friends like as if they have knowledge of it because it's true? Obviously, Tammy Lee and Coder want to know if it's true that Damien really does have this phone. I don't know why Trent would give his ex his phone if they had this horrible falling out, but they want to know if he has the phone because he's telling them that he has it. And there's all of this information and conversation between Chris and Trent on this phone. And of course, as you guys know by now, we went and got the files recently. And if anyone else knows anything different, let me know. But from everything I looked at, I couldn't see where they really had a lot of follow-up on checking with Damien on the phone. They asked him about it. He said it wasn't true, and I didn't see a lot of follow-up. The other thing that I noticed is that Damien's phone call with CBI is redacted, which I found interesting. So the day after Trent's interview on August 30th of 2018, CBI agent Stacey Galbraith calls Damien to follow up on the information that was given to them. And as I just mentioned, the report of the call is in discovery, but the call itself has been redacted. Damien denied any kind of relationship with Trent and said that he had not seen him in the past 3 to 4 years. So because they were having so much trouble getting Trent to tell the truth during his interview, Agent Stacey Galbraith goes back and pulls police records to see if she can even corroborate Trent's story about the domestic violence dispute. So it says in discovery that she is able to find records with Cheyenne PD, Campbell County, and Gillette, Wyoming. And remember Gillette because we'll come back to that. And another interesting thing is there is a domestic violence charge, but it has nothing to do with Trent. So there's only really 2 ways to go with this, and so number 1 is either it's true, which we really can't tell with the information that we have available, or 2, Trent for some reason has a really good beat on what's going on in Damien's life. So Damien explains to the CBI that he met Trent in 2011 when they were both in rehab. He says that he thought Trent was weird, that he didn't know that he was gay until years later, and he tells them that he is straight. When they ask him about the Chris Watts situation, he says that he did hear about the case on the news and that he doubts Trent had a relationship with Chris since he also lied about having a relationship with Damien. When they ask him if in fact it was a lie when Trent told them that Damien had his old cell phone, he says that yes, that is a lie, it's not true. They then called Trent back to try to get some more information to corroborate, and he says that he was assaulted. So that's when they called Damien back a second time, and this time Damien tells them that he no longer wishes to speak with them. They can call his attorney and gives them the attorney's number. It then says in Discovery that when they try to call his attorney, it's the wrong number. So they have to look up this attorney's name online, and they leave a message. And at the time of the report, it says they hadn't received a call back. And then there's really no follow-up in Discovery to this at all. I did find a few things interesting, of course. So here's some of the interesting coincidences to think about. First, Damien tells CBI that he works at Simon Contracting. And I'm not saying that's true or not, it could be, but it doesn't really matter because regardless, he doesn't mention that he works at Ensign Drilling. And there's a note in Discovery that says that on his Facebook, it lists Ensign Drilling as his current place of employment. Now, why he didn't mention that, he does tell them that he works in the oil industry, but I just found it interesting that he leaves that out, so I looked into it a little bit further. First, we were able to confirm that Damien did work at Ensign Drilling in 2018 during the murders. Second, I noticed that there are different locations, but Ensign Drilling is located in Casper, Wyoming, which is only a couple miles from Evansville. If you'll remember from part 7, one of NK's past addresses is listed as Evansville, Wyoming, and she worked on a rig there, and he is also listed as being a roughneck on an oil rig. So you've got them both working on oil rigs not far from each other. Then you also have Trent, who works in Casper and lives nearby, and knowing a lot of people in the area and knowing a lot of people in the oil industry. So that's definitely interesting. During one of NK's 20-minute soliloquies on her clean eating, when she's interviewing with Agent Kobach, she mentions to him that she has a lot of friends in the bodybuilding world, and that's where she gets a lot of her advice. So it's just important to note that Danielle is in the bodybuilding competitive world, as is Damien. So of course we can't confirm the validity of what Trent is saying, but you can see that they are all in the oil and gas industry or know people. They are all in very close proximity. And I do think it's weird that Trent drug him into this at all. And as we get into Trent's mom's statement, we'll go back into that. On September 4th, 2018, NK brings her stacks of notes about her and Chris's relationship and things that she's remembered into the CBI office in Lakewood. This is also the same time when she's transferred over to Baumhover. So another thing I found interesting, of course, is that any subsequent conversations, interviews, anything between Baumhover and NK is redacted out of the Discovery files. They weren't there this time either. And we know the communication is there because we can see it in the phone records. Just interesting that they removed it. The day after NK brings those notes in on September 5th, CBI agent Tammy Lee calls Trent's mom, Colleen Bolte, for a recorded statement. She's still trying to corroborate what was true and what was not from Trent's interview. During her interview with Tammy, Trent's mom's not really able to substantiate any of Trent's claims. Everything that Trent has told his family about Chris or Damien is based solely on his word. Trent had mentioned a Chris to her, but she didn't know his last name and she had never seen him. As far as Damien, she said that he had come over once about 3 to 4 years ago with a group of guys, but that actually lines up with exactly what Damien said to CBI. Tammy asked Mrs. Bolt if Damien came over for Thanksgiving like Trent said he had. She said that Trent said that he did, but it was late after Damien got off of work and she was asleep, did not wake up, and did not actually see him. One thing that she did say that was kind of interesting is that sometime around mid-August, which is obviously around the time of the murders, she heard Trent yelling at someone inside of their home. She said that she heard Trent yell, "I don't care, you can just walk." The next morning, she got up and asked Trent what that was about, and he said that he was yelling at Damien to leave. Again, she never actually saw him. The day after Colleen Bolte's interview, Detective Baumhover brings Amanda, aka Tinder Girl, in for an interview because she has also come forward and claimed to have an affair with Chris. I have listened to her interview a few times now, and I was immediately struck by the similarities between Amanda's statement and Trent's statement. First of all, it's important to remember that no one could see anyone else's statements. Discovery hasn't come out yet. And yes, Trent put his on publicly, but other than that, Discovery doesn't come out until Thanksgiving weekend of 2018. So any similarities in these statements back in August is not because they've seen what each other has to say and they're comparing. First off, Amanda tells Detective Baumhover that she met Chris and they hooked up in March of 2018. And yes, it's that month again, the month that drives me crazy because that's when allegedly Trent and Chris ended their relationship. It's when NK starts at Anadarko. If you go back through all of the series, through the 8 videos, you'll see that this month surfaces over and over again. So interestingly, Amanda tells Detective Baumhover that her ex-husband was trying to get a job at Anadarko and that she does have friends in the oil and gas industry. And all you have to do is take a quick glance at her social media to see that that is true. She has a lot of friends in the oil and gas industry, not just in Colorado, but also in Wyoming, in Montana, and in North Dakota. So I hope you're starting to get the idea by now of why there are so many small coincidences as well. One of the reasons is because this is not Denver proper. For those of you who don't live in Colorado, up in northern Colorado and when you go into Wyoming, it is very small and it is a place where a lot of people, you're connected to everyone and people know people. And it's not like, the huge downtown Denver or southern Colorado even. It is a place where, believably, if you're in the same industry and you're up in these small towns, you are going to know each other. So this whole thing of it's just a coincidence really just doesn't fly if you're familiar with how small these places are, especially in Wyoming. The other thing is that she says that she's living in Greeley at the time. And whether or not that's true, if you look up her LinkedIn, she has listed on there that she works in Gillette, Wyoming since 2017. And again, if you'll remember, Gillette is mentioned by Trent as where he says that Damien was arrested around that same time for getting in a fight. So it's very difficult to draw any kind of straight line with these people because the CBI report will say something, their social media will say something different, but you just kind of have to piece it all together. And any way that you look at it, a lot of these things and timelines and locations and industries all line up perfectly. Before I get into Amanda's statement, I want to point out really quick some random observations I made between Amanda's statement, Trent's statement, and NK's notes. So here's something that I thought was pretty huge. In the notes that NK brings Detective Baumhover on September 4th, she specifically brings up that Chris has told her that the girls speak to him in a condescending, rude manner. And the implication there, of course, is that they've got it from Shanann and that now the girls are speaking to him in the same way. Well, lo and behold, Trent says almost the exact same thing during his CBI interview verbatim. And that's not like a generic thing like saying that someone feels like they're verbally abused or they're unhappy in their marriage. That is a very specific comment and a very specific accusation. And I know in this case that things can get kind of confusing or a little bit murky, but if you think about it, it's actually pretty simple. Either you believe that Trent actually had a relationship with Chris and he did tell them both specifically this information and they remembered to mention it to CBI, or if you don't believe that they had a relationship, which I personally do not, how in the world would they both say that? If Trent never knew Chris, why in the world would he say that specific piece of information? And it just so happens to match exactly with what she says to Detective Baumhover in her notes that she quote unquote remembered. And if it is true that Trent and Chris had a relationship, why is it that the CBI and FBI can't seem to find one shred of proof of that? No one in Trent's life has ever seen Chris. He was always in the parking lot or on the phone, or that person was out of town, or when he was at his mom's house, she wasn't there. Conveniently, Chris has never been seen by anyone to corroborate that. On top of that, it says right in discovery that they cannot find any evidence that the two ever communicated on the phones. And of course, the other one that we talked about in 7 was the fact that Trent emphasizes and really puts importance on the fact that he thinks Chris had multiple affairs. It's a very important thing he's trying to drive home. And then after all of these interviews of NK saying she's the only one, she's so special, she's the only one that's gotten through to him, all of a sudden on August 23rd, she is ready to flip it around and tell Agent Kobach that she thinks that there were other affairs. So with that said, let's start with Amanda's statement, and I'll show you as we go along some of the areas where Amanda's statement lines up with Trent. And what was interesting to me is it's not even the points they bring up. As you'll see, there's some misinformation that lines up as well. And in my opinion, having the same specific information that's wrong is way more suspicious than having the exact same information that's correct. So Amanda Tindergirl meets with Detective Baumhover at the Greeley Police Department on September 6th of 2018, and I will link all of these interviews in the description box on this video. So she starts out by saying that she met Chris on Tinder in February or March of 2018, and she says, which is going to sound familiar, that people are taking random pictures of her as she walks down the street. If you'll remember when Trent did his interview, Coder challenges him when he says that random people were messaging him and harassing him, because Coder basically points out, why would anyone do that if you have told no one about the relationship and no one knows yet? Believe me, bigger people involved in this case walk around Denver Metro every day and don't get recognized. So the fact that she's saying that is very fishy. I don't believe it at all. It is interesting, however, I pointed out, because it's very similar to what Trent says. Of course, she says she met Chris on Tinder, that his username was Chris, and that they met up in a Chick-fil-A parking lot in Greeley. She said that they both drove their own vehicles to the Chick-fil-A parking lot, and that Chris showed up in a navy blue or black truck. So if you're wondering where you've heard this before or why this is significant, if you watched part 7, when Coder and Tammy Lee are pressing Trent on the specifics of Chris's work truck, he describes it as navy blue or black. So as you can see, Chris's truck is neither of those colors. So what are the odds that both Trent and Amanda would describe the wrong color in the exact same words? Here's the clip from Trent's interview regarding Chris's work truck.
We met up then, and I invited him over.
What house were you at that point?
Will and TJ's.
Again?
Yeah.
Okay.
I invited him over.
What's he driving that time?
Same.
The truck?
Yeah.
Okay. What color is this truck?
Dark blue, black. I never saw it. I only saw it at nighttime, but it's a darker color.
Okay.
And it's the same one from the first time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So yet again, just like what I brought up with the comment about the way the girls allegedly talked to Chris, why are Amanda and Trent both describing incorrectly Chris's truck with the exact same colors in the exact same order? Even if you are one that does believe he hooked up with both of these people, that's not the color of the truck he drove. So when Detective Baumhover presses her for more details, she says that after they get there, she goes in and gets a drink, and then they have a quick discussion where he tells her that he works at Anadarko, and she says what a coincidence that her ex-husband was trying to get a job there. And then he says that his, quote, baby's mama won't let him see his kids, and she can relate to that because her ex-husband has their kids in Vermont. So naturally, Detective Baumhover asks her if she has any proof of their conversations and how they communicated. Amanda says that they used the Text Now app, that she was very protective of her phone number for privacy. And like everyone else in this case before her, unfortunately, Amanda has broken her phone, so she no longer has any way to show them any proof that her and Chris ever communicated. She then tells Baumhover that she cannot pick out 90% of the men that she's slept with, but she does remember Chris because of his face, tattoos, and his employment with Anadarko. She then goes on to tell Detective Baumhover that she will not make a very strong witness. And this is where it gets interesting. When Detective Baumhover asks her to describe their intimate encounter in more detail, she says that she doesn't want to say too much without an attorney present because she doesn't want to incriminate herself, which is strange because, as Baumhover points out to her, she's there as a witness, not as a suspect. And I do want to say something really quick before we get into the details of their alleged hookup. I am not one to ever make light of someone's traumatic sexual situation or an assault or an encounter that was violent. I don't find anything funny about it, and I'm not somebody who, I take that very seriously. However, in this case, My personal opinion is I do not believe her. I don't believe they ever met. So I'm not making light of the situation. I just don't believe that they hooked up ever. And I personally do not think, by the way this interview comes across, his report or his reactions, I do not think that Detective Baumhover believes it at all either. So during Trent's interview with CBI, he tells them about the time that they were actually in a bed, not in the car. And when they were hooking up, allegedly that Chris had put his arm around his throat and that he had to push Chris off. He also describes it as getting very aggressive, very fast. And this is actually one of the times Coder kind of points out the inconsistencies in his story, because he had just got done talking about how Chris wouldn't make eye contact, how shy he was, and how he would have never thought he was capable of this because he was so gentle and kind. And then he kind of flips back, and it's a big problem for Coder. And just because we are going into details here, I do also feel like there is this pushed narrative of Chris wanting to engage in anal intercourse. Amanda tells Baumhover almost immediately that that is something that Chris wanted to do, and I can't help but wonder if that has anything to do with the Google searches that are in Discovery. NK is very aware that they're going to be able to pull her Google searches, and so it just seems like another thing that lines up. And who knows, who am I to say that he wasn't into that? I obviously have no idea. So Amanda's story is pretty much the same as Trent's. When they hooked up, he got aggressive. She says that Chris choked her and that she had to push him off, which is the exact pretty much wording that Trent uses as well. So again, just my opinion, you almost have to believe that Chris was with these people to not believe that there was no coaching, no prepping, and that these similarities are not too big of a coincidence. And to be fair, you could argue that, well, they knew that Chris had allegedly strangled his wife, so if they wanted attention, they're naturally going to come out and give the story like this. And yes, that's true. That is a possibility. However, when you look at the other things that line up, like the incorrect information on the truck that is exactly the same, or the details about how Bella and Cece allegedly talked to Chris, that actually lends more to my theory. And again, I've listened to these interviews over and over again, so when I hear this, I immediately can line up how they're similar. And if you feel like doing the same, even though they're long, I will have them linked. So just like in Trent's interview, Detective Baumhover circles back to why Amanda felt the need to come forward. And she, again, is talking about public pressure, just like Trent was, and that people are following her around. And he goes out of his way to dispute this and prove this to be false. He asks her to show him what she's talking about. And she shows him the Radar Online article where her face is blurred out. So there's a blurred out face, yet we are to believe that people are randomly following her around in Colorado and taking pictures of her. It's extremely similar to when Coder basically calls his bluff during Trent's interview and says, how would anyone know? No one even knew till you came forward yesterday. You said you told no one about the relationship, so who are these people that suddenly know? And Trent's actually stumbling on his words, and they catch him up. And the same thing happens here. They're just trying to prove that the motivation that these people are giving to coming forward is not the true motivation. They then briefly discuss the fact that Nicole Atkinson was Amanda's manager at Supercuts and Grilly in 2013, and that is how she found out Shanann was missing, was on Nicole's Facebook wall. Then Baumhover asks her, are you sure that the guy you're talking about was Chris Watts? And Amanda responds with, well, that's the $1 million question. And she tells him that she's 99% sure. So I don't remember if this is in part 7, but it is in Trent's interview. When Tammy Lee asks if Trent is 100% sure that it's Chris they're talking about, he also says that he is 99% sure. And this is also the part where Tammy begins to lose her composure a bit and seems frustrated, and I really don't blame her because it's one of the most frustrating interviews I've ever seen. But she also says, come on, Trent, either it's him or it's not. You guys were together for 10 months. You've been intimate with him multiple times. What do you mean you're 99% sure? Either you say that's the guy I had the relationship, or no, that's not the guy I had the relationship. You're not 99% sure that that's someone you saw for 10 months. And I think it's fairly obvious that the reason that they both give this strange 99% answer is because they are potentially, we don't know, I'm saying potentially, giving false information to CBI and FBI in a huge homicide investigation, which is no little deal. So by giving themselves that tiny little window of 1%, they can turn around and say, well, no, I said 99% sure, so I'm not lying. I never said I was 100% sure. It's a little out to make sure that they don't get charged with obstruction of justice or lying to investigators. And now I'm just going to go over a few nitpicky things that I noticed are very, very similar, if not the same, in both statements, and then you listen and decide what you think. Trent tells investigators that they only communicated through the Meet Me app because he was very protective of his phone number. Amanda says that they only communicated through the Text Now app because she was very protective of her phone number. Both Trent and Amanda say that they would love to show proof of their correspondence, but neither one of them has their phones anymore, so unfortunately they have no proof. And apparently neither one of them has an iCloud or backs up to where they can re-upload that app and have the information there. Trent says he was harassed on Facebook Messenger by people. However, when asked to see them, he says he no longer has Messenger 24 hours later. And then Amanda says the same thing. She was harassed on Facebook Messenger, and unfortunately, she no longer has those messages. And it's just so unfortunate that these people have such bad luck with their phones. They either delete everything right before meeting with investigators, lose their phones, delete the very specific app that investigators are going to need, or break their SIM card. So just terrible luck. And there's one more thing that I haven't been able to make heads or tails of, but during Trent's CBI interview at the very, very beginning, when he's waiting for Tammy Lee and Coder to get into the room, he tells the agent that he's talking to that he was, at the time of the murders, that he's working at UC Health in Thornton. The reason that caught my attention, for those of you who don't live in the Denver area, UC Health in Thornton is just over 1 mile from NK's apartment at the time. So him saying that directly conflicts with information that's on his own social media about where he's working. And Trent does have a CNA in Colorado, so it's possible that he was a nursing assistant at UC Health in Thornton like he claimed. So should we think it's strange that they were only 3 miles apart when she was up working in Wyoming, and now he's claiming to only be 1 mile away from her apartment at the time of the murders? Yeah, I think that's a little bit strange, but it's just something that I caught at the beginning of the interview and thought it was worth mentioning. Keep in mind that the people that I'm putting in this video are all public figures and part of public discovery. I can't even put in these videos everything that we've found. Have we found more connections than what I'm putting in these videos? Yes, absolutely we have. So bottom line, all of these people do have connections in the oil and gas industry, in the same areas, in the same towns, at the same time. And they all have varying connections to rehab. Is that all a coincidence? That's for you guys to decide. In December of 2018, almost exactly a month after Chris pled guilty, you can see on Trent's social media that he goes on a trip to NYC and brings his friend. And he has a post talking about the trip and how much fun they had and showing off all of the designer goods that he bought. Not too shabby for someone who was just couch surfing and staying at other people's houses. Now, could that be from the interviews that he gave? Absolutely. In January of 2019, Trent did an interview with Inside Edition. Before I even saw this video, I was fairly certain that Chris and Trent did not have an affair. After watching this video, I was 100% certain that they did not have any kind of relationship whatsoever. In this ridiculous interview, he completely changes the story and all of the facts that he gave to the CBI and FBI. All of a sudden, instead of the places he told Tammy Lee and Coder that they went, all of a sudden they stayed in hotels and Chris paid for his Botox and everything gets way more exciting. And all of a sudden he has all of these texts that he was unable to produce for investigators. One of the texts that they highlight says, "I miss your face." And yes, obviously that's something that people say, but I can't help the fact that that automatically rang a bell. He even goes as far as to tell the interviewer that Chris talked about getting rid of Shanann all of the time. And if you know anything about his interview with CBI, he told them the exact opposite, that Chris had never indicated anything like that and had never said that. And now it's, oh yeah, he said it all the time. The part that actually kind of made me angry was when Trent actually tells the interviewer his news story, which is that on August 10th, 3 days before the murders, that Chris texted him this long text telling him how much he loved him and that they should run away together to Oregon. Obviously, we know that that's not true. We know that was what was going on during that time. And it was just really a fairy tale that he spun to get on the show and get ratings.
Notorious killer Chris Watts lead a double life as a gay man. 29-year-old Trent Balti claims he met Watts on the dating app Meet Me.
He said he didn't know if he was bisexual or gay.
Balti first came to public attention last August when he spoke anonymously to HLN's Ashley Banfield.
Chris Watts' former lover.
Now he's decided to come forward and let his face be seen. Police took Balti's story seriously and made public this interrogation video.
So we talked about money for sex, how you guys met, the amount of times you guys met. We talked a little bit more about Chris. So I believe you now.
One thing that was written about you is that you're a male escort. Are you a male escort?
No, I am not a male escort.
Balti says he and Watts sometimes got hotel rooms, which Watts paid for. He says Watts also paid for his lip injections.
Did Chris Watts pay for you to have other cosmetic procedures?
He paid for Botox in my forehead and around my eyebrows.
He shared several messages between the two of them. "I miss your face," Watts wrote in this text. Balti said they did what most couples do and watch Netflix together.
We got him into Orange is the New Black.
Did that become one of his favorite shows?
Yeah.
Balti says Watts admitted he had a family, but gave the impression he was separated from his wife, Shanann. Last February, Balti says he was even introduced to Watts' daughters, Bella and Cece, outside a shopping center in Loveland, Colorado.
Cece just talked up a storm. She was one of the happiest little girls I've ever seen. And Bella was very shy.
What was he like with his own kids?
He was very attentive, very loving.
Did they seem scared of him?
No, not at all.
How did they seem?
They seemed very comfortable with him. He was very proud of his daughters.
That night, Balti says he found out Watts was still living with Shanann.
He said that Shanann was verbally and emotionally abusive. I said, why don't you just file for divorce? He said, I'm just worried that she won't let me see the girls.
Balti says he is haunted by several comments Watts made about his family.
Chris told me it would be ideal if me and him could move to Oregon and take the girls.
He suggested to you that the two of you would pick up his daughters and flee to Oregon?
Yeah.
Did he ever talk about trying to get his wife out of his life?
Yeah, Chris spoke of that a lot.
Once, he says he overheard Shanann yelling at Watts on the phone.
Chris said there's got to be some way to get this effing bee out of my life.
That takes on a whole new meaning now, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Trent says he and Watts finally broke up in early May 2018 after 10 months of dating.
Why did your relationship with Chris end?
I just started seeing through Chris's lies.
Balti says he was shocked to learn that Watts was having a relationship with a coworker, a woman named Nichol Kessinger.
Was Chris Watts seeing you at the same time that he was seeing this woman?
Their relationship was only for 2 months. So at times up, it seems like he got with her right after I ended things in May.
Just 3 days before Watts killed his wife and daughters, Balti says Watts sent him a long text.
Chris said that he was in love with me. He said that he'd never been so comfortable with someone.
When you learned that he was arrested for murdering his wife and children, how did you react?
I got ill. I was in complete shock. I wish I'd never met him.
1 month after this interview, as we know, Detective Baumhover, Agent Tammy Lee, and Agent Graham Coder went up to Wisconsin to speak with Chris again. During that interview, they asked him more information about NK, and they asked him more information about Trent. If they had already dismissed Trent, it makes you wonder what exactly their motive was in asking Chris more about him. Hopefully this video helped fill in some blanks or tie some things together for you as far as the people involved and some of the strange coincidences surrounding this case. There will be a part 9, and I really don't know how many parts there will be, but they will keep coming out as long as we keep getting new information and keep getting more requests. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you'll be notified of more videos in this series and on other cases as well.
Hi. It's me. I miss your face. I was just calling to say hi. Call me back.